Hi and welcome to Solving Quadratic Equations by Factorising and the Quadratic Formula. Just before we start, a reminder that there is a notes jotter available for this video. Just check the description below for a download link and you can work along with me as we go through the video. Okay, so we're going to begin by trying to solve some quadratic equations by factorising. And that should be your first port of call in terms of trying to solve an equation. If you can factorise it, that's going to be the quickest and easiest way to get to your answer. One thing I need to point out right at the very start, if you are trying to solve a quadratic equation, it must be in the form equals 0 at the end. So if it's not, you may have to do a little bit of rearranging just to make sure that it does equal 0, otherwise the methods will not work. Now, in terms of factorising, in this case, we know we have an expression in the form of something x squared, something x, and a number, meaning it is a double bracket, and in each case we need an x in each. Now, when we are factorising, we are always looking for a pair of numbers which multiply to make the end and add to make the middle. So two numbers which are going to multiply to make 3. Well, the only option there is actually 1 and 3. And if you just check, do they add to make 4? Well, yes, they do, and therefore we're going to have plus 1 and we're going to have plus 3, and they equal 0. Now, in order to solve it, what we need to be just thinking about here is, what do these pair of brackets actually mean? Well, it means we have something multiplied by something else, and we've got something times something makes 0. Well, now what that means is one of those things must be 0. So either x plus 1 equals 0, or x plus 3 equals 0. And if that is the case, what does x equal? Well, in the first case, x plus 1 equals 0, therefore x equals negative 1. Or x plus 3 equals 0, therefore x equals negative 3. My solution to this problem is that x equals negative 1 or negative 3. And how could I have gotten that answer really quickly without having to do this piece of working out here? Well, it all comes down to the numbers inside of the brackets. If you just check, we had plus 1 in the first bracket and we ended up with an answer of negative 1. We had plus 3 in the second bracket and ended with an answer of negative 3. All we do is we take the negative version of what is already in the brackets. They will be our solutions to the equation. So let's try it again. X squared plus x take away 6 equals 0. So again, already in the form equals 0, so that's good. So all we then want to do is see if we can factorise it. Well, we've got an x in each case. I then need two numbers which are going to multiply to make negative 6. So I would have negative 6 and positive 1, positive 6 and negative 1, negative 3 and positive 2, negative 2 and positive 3, and I need them to add to make positive 1. And so which one adds to make positive 1? Well, it's actually that last pair there. So negative 2, positive 3, and they equal 0. So what are the solutions to that? Well, we just go into the bracket. The first one has a negative 2 in it, so the solution is positive 2, and the second bracket has plus 3 in it, and so our solution will be negative 3. So x could either be 2 or negative 3. And lastly, x squared take away 6x plus 8 equals 3. So here is the situation that I was talking about. We don't have equals to 0 at the end, and therefore we're going to have to do a little bit of work just beforehand to make it equal to 0. And so it's still x squared, it's still take away 6x, but what I'm going to have to do is subtract 3 from both sides. So if I subtract 3 from both sides, that becomes plus 5 and equal to 0. Now it is in the format where we can try and factorise in order to solve the equation. And so it's going to have an x in each bracket, and then we need a pair of numbers which are going to multiply to make positive 5, but they have to add to make negative 6, and therefore they're both going to be negative numbers in this case. So it's either negative 5 and negative 1. Well, they're actually the only two numbers which do multiply to make positive 5, and therefore we're going to have negative 5 and negative 1, and therefore the solutions are the negative versions of this. So the negative version of negative 5 is positive 5, and the negative version of negative 1 is positive 1. So x equals 5 or 1. So next we have equations in the form of ax squared plus bx plus c, and the idea here is that we should be trying to factorise if possible, and so because this has a coefficient of x squared, the first thing we need to do is we need to multiply our coefficient of x squared by the number at the end. It's going to give us 24. And the idea is that what we now need is a pair of numbers which are going to multiply to make 24 but add to make 10. And so multiplying to make 24, we've got 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8, 4 and 6. Do any of those add to make 10? Well, the last pair do. And therefore, what we're going to do is we're just going to now rewrite the equation as 3x squared plus 4x plus 6x and plus 8, and separate it in two, and we'll factorise each piece. So the common factor between 3x squared and plus 4x is x, so it's x brackets 3x plus 4, and the common factor between 6x and 8 is 2, so that's going to be plus 2 brackets 3x plus 4, and we'll bring these two back together, so that's x plus 2, and the other bracket comes together as well, 3x plus 4, and so that's it factorised. So how do we then solve it? Well, again, if we just take this in turn the way we did before, that means either x plus 2 equals 0 or 3x plus 4 equals 0. Now if it's the first version, x plus 2 equals 0, then x equals negative 2. So that's just exactly the same as before. We've taken the negative version of what's in the bracket. But for the 3x plus 4, well, I would have to do 3x first by subtracting 4, and then I would need to divide by 3. And so x would equal negative 4 over 3. Those are our two solutions. Now, how could I have gotten that a little bit quicker? Well, let's have a look at the fraction here. It said plus 4 in the bracket, and we've gone to negative 4. So I've still taken the negative version, and then I've divided by the number in front of it. And so if in your brackets, when you factorise it, you get an expression of ax plus b, well, in that case, you need to take the negative version of the number at the end and divide by the number in front of x. Okay, so next we're going to solve 2x squared plus 7x take away 30 equals 0. And so the first thing we need to do is just see if we can factorise it, multiplying together 2 and negative 30. So that's going to give me negative 60. And so I need a pair of numbers that are going to multiply to make negative 60, but add to make positive 7. And so I'd have 1 and negative 60, or 60 and negative 1. I'd have 2 and negative 30, or 30 and negative 2. I would have 3 and negative 20, or 20 and negative 3. Or we could have 4 and negative 15, or 15 and negative 4, or 5 negative 12, and 12 negative 5. And if we actually look at that very last one, 12 and negative 5, that makes positive 7. So that is the pair I'm going to go with. So 2x squared plus 12x, take away 5x, take away 30. If we split that in half, the common factor between 2x squared and 12x is 2x, so x plus 6. And between negative 5x and negative 30, that's negative 5x plus 6. And so, bring those back together, we get 2x take away 5 in one bracket, and x plus 6 in the other bracket. And we know that that equals 0. So, solutions. Well, what we need is the negative version of what's in this bracket. So the negative version there would be that x equals negative 6. And in this case, the negative version of negative 5, that is positive 5. But remember, we then have to divide by the number in front of x. And so it's 5 over 2. And so x equals 5 over 2, or x equals negative 6. And lastly, solving 4x squared, take away 17x plus 15 equals 0. So again, all I want to do is multiply my 4 by my 15. It gives me an answer of 60. But here, it has to add to make a negative value, and therefore both of the numbers must be negative in this case. And so I'd have negative 1, negative 60, negative 2, negative 30, negative 3, negative 10, negative 4, negative 15, negative 5, negative 12, negative 6, negative 10. And if we have a look at that, which ones would add to make negative 17? Well, it'll be that pair there, negative 5 and negative 12. And so we rewrite 4x squared, take away 5x, take away 12x, plus 15. We split. Common factor between 4x squared and negative 5x is just x. So that's 4x take away 5. And the common factor between negative 12x and plus 15. Well, in this case, I just want to make sure that I get 4x take away 5 in my bracket. And so the factor would have to be negative 3. And so bring those back together. I would get in one bracket x take away 3, and in the other bracket 4x take away 5, and that must equal 0. And this bracket gives me that x equals 3, the negative version of negative 3. And this one, well, x is going to be the negative version of this piece, so 5, and divided by this piece, 4. So x equals 3, or x equals 5 over 4. And so then, what if it won't factorise? So if we've just tried by multiplying a by c and finding pairs of numbers that multiply to make c and add to make b, if it doesn't work, what do we do? Well, in those cases, if your equation is in the form of ax squared plus bx plus c, we have what is known as the quadratic formula. And what we have is that x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Now this formula can actually be used for all quadratic equations. Now some of them you may find that they don't actually work, but we can at least give the formula a go, and let's see if we can do that. So solve 3x squared plus 8x take away 3 equals 0. Now I have just made a note here. This does actually factorise, so if we wanted to, we could have factorised this expression and we would have gotten exactly the same answers. But in this case, all we need to do is we need to just identify what a, b and c actually are. So in this equation, a is the number that's in front of x squared, and so it's 3. B is the number that's in front of x, and so that's 8. And c is the number that is at the end, and so that is negative 3. Now the positives and negatives are very, very important in this question, especially for this area here where we have negative b, and this area here where we have a b squared, and for the fact that we're multiplying a negative 4 by 2 letters. And so all we're going to do is we're going to put each of those letters substituted into the formula in order to find our values for x. So the first bit is negative b, and so it's going to be negative 8. We then have plus or minus and the square root of b squared, so that's 8 squared, take away 4, and ac means times a times c, so 4 times 3 times negative 3. And all of that is over 2a, so 2 times 3. Now the important feature here is this little symbol here, the plus or minus. It means that there are two different versions of this. And so what we're going to do is we're going to grab our calculator, and the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to form a fraction, and I'm going to type in at the top negative 8 plus the square root of 8 squared, take away 4 times 3 times negative 3, all over 2 times 3. And that is going to give me the first version of x. So if I press equals, x equals 1/3. If I then just go back into the working that I've just put into the calculator and change that plus sign so that it is a takeaway, it will give me the other answer. So x equals -3. And so there we've got two different answers that will be the solution to the top equation. Let's give it another go with this one. 4x squared plus 7x take away 5 equals 0. So again, A is 4, B is 7, C is -5. And so all I'm going to do is, once again, I'm going to put each of those values into the formula. And so I'll have negative B, so that's -7 plus or minus the square root of 7 squared, take away 4 times A, which is 4, times C, which is -5. And that's all going to be divided by 2 lots of 4. And again, all I need to do is grab my calculator. So fraction, -7, and we're going to start with plus the square root of 7 squared, take away 4 times -5. And we're going to divide that by 2 times 4. And we get an answer of -7 plus the square root of 129 over 8. Not a particularly nice answer, but if we do it as a decimal, it's going to be 0.545 to 3 decimal places. So 0.545 is one version, but the other version would be, again, if we just take it back within the working out, and we take it back all the way so that it says subtract rather than add. So we'll take away, and we'll press equals, and we get -7 plus, and that is -2.295. And so we have our two answers, and I'll just make sure to 2 to 3 decimal places. One last question then. Solve 3x squared, take away 6x equals -2. Now, first of all, this piece here, it is not in the form equals 0. It must always be in that form if we want to solve the equation. Therefore, the first thing I'm going to actually do here is just to rearrange this so that it does equal 0, and that would be by adding 2 to both sides. So that now equals 0. And then all I want to do is, again, just write down what each of my letters are. So A would be 3. B is a negative value here. It's -6. And C, well, that is 2. And so now when I place this into the formula, this part becomes very important. It's negative B. And so that is -6. And if you remember, two negatives, negative times a negative would be a positive. But then we have plus or minus the square root, again, b squared. Now that is -6 squared, but it's -6 in a bracket, just to make sure that your calculator definitely does this the correct way. 4 times 3 times 2, and then that's all going to be over 2 times 3. And so again, all I want to do is grab my calculator and fill in each of those values. So the fraction, negative brackets, -6, plus the square root of brackets, -6 squared, take away 4 times 3 times 2, all over 2 times 3, and we get the answer 3 plus root 3 over 3, which is 1.577. Or if we just go back and make it a subtraction instead, so just going back in the calculation until the point where it says subtract, we would then get 3 take away root 3 over 3, which is 0.423. And that is our value of x. And so we're going to end with the exam question. It came from the Edexcel paper in November 2018 and it was on higher paper 3. And it says solve 5x squared, take away 4x, take away 3 equals 0. Give your solutions correct as to 3 significant figures. Now, in this video, we've been looking at solving equations by factorising and by using the formula. Which one are we going to use here? Well, there are a couple of clues. First of all, it's paper 3. It's a calculator question. So it would suggest that we would rather use a calculator than do some factorising. But also, the fact that the answer has to be given to 3 significant figures. That is a suggestion that this is not going to be something that we need to factorise. And so in this case, I'm going to use the formula A equals 5, B equals -4, C equals -3. And then I'm going to put each of those into the formula. So I have -b plus or minus the square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And so let's feed each of those values in. So it's -b, so that is -4 plus or minus the square root. Again, it's -4 that is being squared. Take away 4 times 5 times -3. And that's all being divided by 2 lots of 5. And so again, grab the calculator and fit each of those in. So we have negative brackets -4 plus the square root of -4 squared, take away 4 times 5 times -3 all over 2 times 5, and that gives me 2 plus root 19 over 5, which is 1.27. Now it asks for 3 significant figures, so 1.27 will be our first answer, and our second answer would just be where we have changed the plus to a takeaway. And there it is. It is -0.472. And those are our 2 solutions.